Hey everyone, Casual Gaming Dad here, and I'm back with another video about competitive Pokemon. And I just wanted to share some of my thoughts after doing a bit of research and whatnot since the last video I made. But before I get into that, I just wanted to say that I'm really thankful and grateful for all of the comments and the views and the feedback that I got from my last video. I was honestly overwhelmed by the amount of responses I got, and it really made me feel very welcomed, as a casual gamer trying out competitive Pokemon for the first time. And I really appreciate that. I really do. And can I say that it's not my first time playing in a competitive space, or at least trying it out, right? And compared to a lot of others that I've done in the past, mostly with video games, sometimes with TCGs, this was a very positive experience for me. And competitive spaces are very often filled with toxicity because of people's obsession with wanting to win and whatnot. So I really appreciate that. I really do. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. So with that being said, let's get into it. I got some great feedback and comments. I've been doing a lot of listening to videos, watching them, kind of while I'm doing other things, and also taking a look at some of these, sites that I have here. Of course, there's Pokemon Showdown, which I'd heard of before. I just never really utilized it. And then Smoggin, which also led me to Showdown as well. I've been continuing to play Pokemon Violet quite a bit, and just been farming up resources and building up Pokemon and shiny hunting and stuff. I have not played any competitive yet, although I do since the last time I did the video. But I do plan on recording some matches here pretty soon. I believe Season 2 of the Battle Stadium starts today. So I was kind of waiting for that for a refresh. Last time I made it to Great Ball tier, and at first I thought maybe I'm going to try to see if I can get to Ultra Ball, but, I'm not going to set any expectations really for it. I'm really just going to play just to get some more experience and acquire knowledge through the set experience, right? But I have been learning a lot, and I wanted to share some things and then give you some of my thoughts on some differences of opinion that I have now compared to before a bit. So, for example, here is a team that, for the most part, was the same as Wolfie VGC's first team that he used when he was climbing the ladder when the games first came out, when the Battle Stadium Season 1 started. The only difference being the Sylveon instead of the Annihilate, simply because I liked Sylveon better on this team composition. But just using the Showdown, which by the way is really awesome. You can so easily change everything. It's really accessible, all the move sets. I think one of the more useful things that I've gotten out of it has been the stat EV and, well, I mean IV, but yeah, the stat changes, and I think that this allows you to tinker with the different stats before going into the game, for example, and actually investing, money and whatnot into that, and then having to pull back on it with berries, which you can do relatively easily, I'd say most of the time. But I do really like this a lot, and I plan on using this obvious simulator to get a little bit of practice as well. With that being said, I did want to make a comment about something that a frequently suggested feedback that I got in my last video was about the use of rental teams. And so I think I mentioned this before, but I think the idea of rental teams is really awesome. I love the idea, the concept of it makes a lot of sense, and it allows for people to try out teams without having to necessarily spend all the time and energy into leveling up and also figure out the IVs, the EVs. It's definitely more casual, friendly. I'd say it definitely assists those types of players, which I would fall into that category, right? with that being said, and again, I just want to preface before I give my opinion on that a little more. I'm definitely not opposed to the idea of using rental teams at some point. I have yet to do that yet, although I may just try some different things and make teams myself up on Showdown. Because there's something to be said about using your own Pokemon that you've caught yourself, that you've leveled up yourself, that you've invested into yourself. And for that reason, I want to take that route for now. If that makes sense, right? So, again, I'm not opposed to using rental teams in the future, but for the time being, I'm going to use Pokemon that I both catch and evolve myself and level myself. One of the things I really enjoy about creating teams, decks for TCGs, just in games and whatnot, is the theory crafting and the deck building and the team building. I really enjoy that part a lot. I'd say I enjoy it as much, if not sometimes more, than the actual playing the game. I really enjoy that part a lot, and I'm sure lots of people can understand that part. It's a lot of fun, and it can be very rewarding just coming up with ideas. And so I'm going to be using Showdown a lot to do that for myself moving forward. Smogon's great because it just has this massive database where I can just click on really any Pokemon, and it even shows like articles and analyses that people have done and sample sets, EV spreads, and I think it's really great because it gives you kind of a starting point if you're not familiar with a Pokemon, for example. So I really like that a lot about it. I really do. So these are two really great resources for sure. Now, I think one of the more challenging things is really going to be just getting some more experience playing the game and getting into the mindset of your opponents, and not only predicting their moves, but predicting what they may believe you're going to do, and whether or not they're going to predict that. Do you get that feeling, the intuition? What is the most optimal play? The downside with that is sometimes someone might not think in that way, and they might do a play that might not make sense to you, especially for a very logical and pragmatic person like myself and others like Wolfie and a lot of other competitive players I've seen on YouTube and whatnot, and even Twitch a bit. And so I think that's going to be the challenge. But generally speaking, if you're playing for the competitive scene and you want to get better at the game, then you got to look towards what are optimal plays and give your opponent the benefit of the doubt, at least initially, unless they give you a reason not to, right? And then just trying to play around them. And sometimes you'll get things right, and sometimes you'll make bad calls, right? Sometimes you'll double up into a Pokemon and it protects versus, it won't, and you'll get rewarded or punished, right? So the experience. So I think that's one of the things that I really need to spend a bit more time on. Another thing is really sitting down and looking at, for example, I believe here there was a damage calculator. Okay, so this is definitely something that I need to become very familiar with, because I'm not at all in the slightest. And I really, really mean, I'm just going to say it, like, seeing these percentages, these ranges, I hear a lot of players talk about them, and I understand what it means. But what I don't understand about it is how to calculate these things really on the fly. You can make kind of just broad calculations in your mind. Excuse me. But I'm going to have to tinker with these things more, just so I can have some of those at least broad calculations in my mind, because knowing what percent, like knowing if you're going to survive or not, is a big deal. Not just for playing in the battles, but also for when you're putting together your team and where your EV spreads are. So if I'm a Sylveon And I want to know if I can survive a Make It Rain from a Goldango with no choice specs and no Steel Terra. And then, okay, so I know what I need to survive that. And I know what I need to survive one with a Terra, and then one to survive it with specs and Terra, or if I can at all, or if it's worth putting more, EVs into special defense, right? I mean, Sylveon's pretty bulky in special defense, but do I need more to survive? What do I benefit more from there? Should I put it more into HP? Also, like knowing what the difference is between putting more, EVs into HP, for example, versus into specifically defense or special defense. Like, am I getting more out of putting points into defense versus HP? Does HP cover for both? Obviously not, because if it did, then everyone would just max out. You wouldn't bother doing this, and you would just max out HP on all your Pokemon, right? Because then it's like, well, it's covering for those things, but obviously it doesn't, because let's take a look, right? If I do 10 EVs here, so hold on, let me delete that. Okay, so if I do 10 here, right, that's just 1, versus 10 here, it's 1. But what happens if I do 100 and 100, right? You see, the numbers are not the same that it goes up, right? So here it goes from 85 to 98, so it goes up by 13. Okay, it does go up by 13 on age. Okay, so anyways, I know that I heard some people talking about it, so I guess I need to research a little more and understand what do you benefit more from. So if I know I'm going against a physical attacker, or I want Sylveon to be more bulky defense-wise, I'm going to put more into defense versus HP. If I'm getting, what am I getting more out of, like value-wise, right? Because otherwise, like I said, everyone would just max HP. They wouldn't bother putting in defenses unless you're just maxing HP and a defense, because you want to make a Pokemon really bulky, But if you're doing like all in on, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, as a casual, oftentimes we think of simplicity and you think, okay, it would make sense for me to max out on special attack with Sylveon and on HP. And I'm good to go, which is what I did when I made my Sylveon to start in the game, right? But now I'm thinking maybe that's not optimal, and I know it's not, because I know lots of people, just from looking at people's spreads and stuff, that's not the case, and I want to understand why, and again, it's probably for dealing with certain damage calcs. Maybe you need a certain amount of speed. Speed is another thing, and I want to talk about that for a couple of minutes, so I'm going to transition into that. But speed is another thing where this is probably the concept I hear talked about the most, is speed control, okay? And knowing, hey, I know that Tatsugiri, for example, has a base speed of 102 versus Sylveon's 80, right? So if I want to outspeed a Tatsugiri, then I'm going to need a certain amount of EVs to be able to, to be able to beat it out. So, was it 102? Okay, 102. So if I want to be able to specifically outspeed that, then I have to put 18 Carbos in to be able to outspeed that, right? So those are why specific calculations are done for speed and whatnot. So, and again, speed control, right? So obviously matches can be decided by whether you go first or whether you go second. And sometimes you want to go second. There can be reasons why you want to. Let's say you want to go after, you got your Tyranitar, who you know is slower than your Lycanroc, and you want your Lycanroc to go first in the Sandstream, so they could do the Rock Slide, and then you can go in with the Assurance and get the double damage in, right? So sometimes you want to be slower, or let's say you're using Trick Room, right? And that's something I wanted to talk a little bit about. I noticed is I see a lot of teams revolving around either Trick Room, Tailwind, or at the very least you need to have a counter to that yourself, right? So, for example, I have some Pokemon. I have Dragonite with Tailwind, which is an option, right? And then I have Gallade with Trick Room. And I have other Pokemon that could use Trick Room as well. Like I have a Farigiraf that I could boost and it's ready to go. And there are others too. But like which route you want to take? Do you want to use screens versus not have Grimmsnarl? I used that quite a bit and I liked it. But I was like really surprised, for example, when I used certain things and they didn't work out the way I thought. You know, like when Grimmsnarl with the light screen up didn't survive or make it rain. I was like, oh man, I need to put more special defense or, you know, whatnot. So, but with the speed control, I think that since it's plays such a huge role in the game, I feel like most teams have to build around one or the other or both. Like they'll have in their 6 a Tailwind Pokemon and a Trick Room one, you know, or at least a Pokemon that benefits from those things, you know. So if I'm going to use, for example, like I really like the idea of using Kingambit. I recently got a shiny of a Pawniard, and I boosted up a Kingambit, and I really want to use it. It's it's very, very strong, very bulky, very high attack, and you know, great typing and everything. But its speed is dismal, you know. So obviously it works really well in a setting like Trick Room, right? So I can either have a Trick Room Pokemon myself, or I can have Kingambit on my team, so that when I see a team that is likely to bring in Trick Room against me, then I bring in the Kingambit in the back, and then I punish them for that, because then I get to benefit from it as well. So that's something that I feel is a really, really big part of the game. It's almost annoying how important it is, really, and how, like, you really benefit from having Trick Room and or a Tailwind on your team versus just trying to counter it, you know, unless you have some other way to boost speed. Like if you don't do that, then you're using, you know, a Choice Scarf on a Pokemon, right, to boost its speed, to be able to outspeed things, because really it's oftentimes the make or break, unless you have something that's really defensive and you can afford to have lower speed, you know, like Dondozo and whatnot, or something bulky, right? Or you have priority moves, right? You can work on it that way, you know, like Ice Shard or Extreme Speed, right? So there's a lot to think about, and you know, these are just some of my thoughts. I'm going to end the video here. I don't want it to be too long, but I do appreciate everyone again for taking the time to watch and to hear my thoughts. Again, from a casual perspective, I will be recording some matches here relatively soon. You know, I hope so. Like I said, I like the theory crafting and whatnot, but I know I saw some requests for that, and I'm happy to do that, you know, and probably get wrecked, but I think I think my goal will be just to get back to that Great Ball tier, you know. I mean, if I can go beyond that, obviously, but you know, it would be nice, but I'm not expecting that, you know. And just, you know, have some fun with that, you know. And I'm gonna stick with doubles for the time being. I do want to try singles in the future, but I think for me, doubles is a lot more interesting, and in the sense that there's just so much more to think about, and you know, it's more rewarding to, you know, call the right play or outsmart your opponent, or, you know. And so for that reason, I'm going to stick with doubles for now, because it's very, very different. I think I'd have to change the mindset a bit for singles, you know. So that's it for now. But thanks for tuning in, and if you like what you see, you know, leave a like, consider subscribing. You know, I'll hopefully bring some more content in the future, and I appreciate you. Take care for now. Bye-bye.